All right, Miss Hart's Year 11 Health and Social Care class, welcome to your personalized deep dive.
You bet.
We know you've got that tracking assessment coming up next week
Right. And then
and the Unit 1 exam this summer.
the big one.
So we're going to tackle some key info that'll help you prep for both.
Yeah, we're going to be focusing on the impact of physical factors on health and well-being.
We've gone through all the material you sent in, the articles, the videos, those past paper questions,
All of it.
and we're going to pull out the most important bits,
Absolutely.
along with some memorable examples to help you really understand this stuff.
Think of it as a cheat sheet for your brain.
Love it. Okay, let's start with the basics when we talk about chronic illnesses.
Yeah.
What exactly are we talking about?
Well, the word chronic just means something that persists over a long time.
Okay.
So we're not talking about that cold you caught last week.
Right.
We're talking about conditions that are ongoing and often require long-term management.
So things like asthma, arthritis, heart disease, those sorts of things.
Exactly. And here's where it gets interesting. Chronic illnesses are often linked to the aging process.
Okay.
As we get older, our bodies naturally go through changes that make us more susceptible to these kinds of conditions.
Makes sense. Our bodies aren't exactly brand new anymore.
Right. Think about it.
Yeah.
Our bones tend to become more fragile, our muscles weaken, and our vision and hearing might not be as sharp.
Makes sense.
Even our hearts don't pump as efficiently as they used to.
Plus, it takes longer to bounce back from illness. I swear it used to take me a day to get over a cold, and now it takes a week.
It's true, our body's natural repair mechanisms slow down with age. And all of these physical changes can have a domino effect on our overall well-being.
So it's not just about the physical symptoms themselves, but also how those symptoms affect us emotionally and socially.
Exactly. Imagine struggling to keep up with your friends because your arthritis makes it painful to walk, or having to give up a hobby you love because your vision is deteriorating. These limitations can lead to feelings of frustration, isolation, even depression.
It's like a whole chain reaction. Now, our source material dives deeper into several specific chronic illnesses.
Yeah.
And I have to say, some of these stories were pretty powerful.
Absolutely. There's one video about a woman living with type 2 diabetes that really stayed with me.
Okay.
She talked about the constant struggle of managing her blood sugar levels
Yeah.
and how it felt like she was always having to say no to things she enjoyed.
That must be so tough. It's like having a little voice in your head constantly reminding you to be careful.
Right. And then there was this other video about a man with osteoporosis who broke his hip just from a minor fall.
Oh, wow.
It really highlighted how fragile bones can become and how even everyday activities can become risky.
Wow, it's easy to take our mobility for granted until something like that happens.
It is. And speaking of taking things for granted, the video about coronary heart disease was a real eye-opener.
Real.
There was this young man, barely in his 40s, who had a heart attack.
Oh, my God.
It made me realize that these conditions don't just affect older people.
It's scary. It's like a wake-up call to take care of our hearts no matter our age.
Absolutely. And then there's dementia, which is a whole other challenge altogether.
Right.
The video we saw featured a couple coping with the husband's diagnosis. And it was heartbreaking to witness how the disease was gradually robbing him of his memories and his sense of self.
That's got to be one of the toughest things a family can go through, seeing someone you love slowly slip away like that.
It is. And finally, there was a video about a teenage girl with asthma who had a severe attack that landed her in the hospital.
Oh, no.
She missed out on a school trip because of it, and you could feel the frustration and isolation she was experiencing.
It's a reminder that chronic illnesses can affect people of all ages, and that the impact goes far beyond the physical symptoms.
Right. It's about understanding the whole person and how these conditions affect their emotional and social well-being as well.
Okay.
Now, shifting gears a bit,
Okay.
let's talk about genetically inherited conditions. These are conditions that are well in your genes from the get-go, right?
Yeah.
It's all about the traits that are passed down from parents to their children.
Okay.
We're not just talking about things like eye color or hair texture here.
All right.
We're talking about conditions that are caused by specific genes.
Okay, so like cystic fibrosis and Duchenne muscular dystrophy, which are
Yeah.
highlighted in our source material.
Precisely. These are two very different conditions.
Okay.
But they both illustrate the profound impact that genetically inherited factors can have on a person's life.
Let's start with cystic fibrosis.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly is going on in the body with this condition?
It all comes down to mucus, but not the normal kind.
Okay.
With cystic fibrosis, the body produces mucus that is abnormally thick and sticky.
Ooh.
This mucus builds up in the lungs and digestive system, leading to a whole cascade of problems.
So in the lungs, it makes it hard to breathe, right?
Yep.
And in the digestive system, it interferes with the absorption of nutrients.
Exactly. And because it's a genetic condition, it's present from birth and continues throughout a person's life.
The source material mentions a video called Love on the Transplant List
Yeah.
that features a young woman named Kirsty who has cystic fibrosis. Did you get a chance to watch that one?
I did. And what struck me most was Kirsty's incredible resilience.
Really?
Here she is facing this serious life-limiting condition,
Yeah.
and yet she is determined to live life to the fullest.
Wow.
She's studying at university, she's got a loving boyfriend,
Wow.
and she's actively advocating for organ donation. It's truly inspiring.
It's a reminder that even in the face of adversity, there's always room for hope and determination.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about Duchenne muscular dystrophy.
Okay.
This one is particularly challenging because it involves progressive muscle weakening and wasting.
So what does that actually look like in someone's life?
Well, as the muscles weaken every day, activities become increasingly difficult.
Okay.
Walking becomes a struggle,
Yeah.
eventually leading to the need for a wheelchair.
Oh,
Simple things like climbing stairs
Yeah.
or even lifting objects become major obstacles.
and the source material mentions that there can be complications like scoliosis, which is a curvature of the spine, right?
Yes, and as the muscles involved in breathing and heart function weaken,
Okay.
there can be serious respiratory and cardiac problems.
Oh, gosh.
These are serious complications that can be life-limiting.
The video about Tom the young man with Duchenne muscular dystrophy was really powerful.
I agree.
I was particularly struck by his description of how his world gradually became smaller as his muscles weakened.
That's such a poignant way to put it.
Yeah.
It's like the condition slowly chips away at your independence and your ability to experience the world the way you used to.
It's a stark reminder of how precious our mobility is and how much we rely on our muscles for even the simplest of tasks.
It really is. Now, I know you've got those past paper questions and activities from your source material, and they're incredibly helpful for understanding how these conditions can impact physical, emotional, and social well-being.
Right? They're like a roadmap for what you need to know for your exams.
Exactly. So let's dive into those, shall we? There's a question from the June 2017 paper that asks about how genetic inheritance can affect a 3-year-old named Mark's growth and development.
Okay, so we're thinking about things that are passed down from parents to their children that might affect Mark's development.
Right, and the answer highlights a few key points. Mark could inherit tall genes from his parents, meaning he might be predisposed to being taller than average.
Makes sense. We all know those families where everyone is over 6 feet tall.
Exactly. But it's not just about height. The answer also points out that Mark could inherit a health condition like cystic fibrosis, which we just discussed.
Right.
This would obviously have a huge impact on his growth and development, potentially leading to stunted growth and other complications.
It's a reminder that genetic inheritance isn't always about positive traits.
Right, and the final point in the answer is that Mark might have a tendency to develop a particular condition affecting physical development, resulting in learning difficulties.
So even if he doesn't directly inherit a specific condition, his genes might make him more susceptible to certain challenges.
Precisely, it's a complex interplay of nature and nurture.
Okay, so that's the 2017 paper.
Mm.
What about the June 2015 paper? Is there anything about genetic inheritance in that one?
There is. It asks you to explain 2 different ways growth and development may be affected by genetic inheritance.
And what does the answer say?
Well, it brings up cystic fibrosis and muscular dystrophy again, emphasizing how these conditions can impact health and even life expectancy.
Heavy stuff, but important to understand.
Absolutely. The answer also mentions height, which we touched on earlier. It's a simple but clear example of how genes can directly influence physical development.
Got it. Now, the source material also has a whole section on how genetically inherited conditions can affect physical, social, and emotional well-being. It might be helpful to break that down a bit further.
Definitely. Let's start with social well-being. The source material makes a really important point here.
Right.
Physical problems can limit opportunities for leisure activities.
So if you can't participate in sports or other social activities because of a genetic condition, it can impact your ability to connect with others and build friendships.
Exactly. And some people with genetically inherited conditions may be unable to work or have to leave their jobs due to their health, which can also negatively impact social well-being.
Like a ripple effect impacting different areas of your life.
It is, and it's important to remember that the impact on social health and well-being will vary from person to person.
Right.
And even for the same individual, it can change over time depending on how their condition progresses.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the impact on emotional well-being?
This is a big one. The source material highlights that people with genetically inherited conditions might have low self-esteem
Yeah.
because they see themselves as different or less capable than others. They might worry about how their condition will affect their future, which can lead to anxiety and stress.
And if the condition affects their appearance, it can impact their self-image and body image, further affecting self-esteem.
It's a lot to deal with emotionally, but it's important to remember that everyone copes differently. Some people find incredible strength and resilience in the face of these challenges.
It's all about focusing on what you can control, building a strong support network, and finding ways to live a meaningful life despite the obstacles.
Now, to help you really understand these concepts, the source material dives even deeper into cystic fibrosis and Duchenne muscular dystrophy, providing activities and past paper questions that get you thinking about the specific challenges of each condition.
Great, let's take a closer look at those, starting with cystic fibrosis.
There's an activity that asks you to analyze how cystic fibrosis might affect someone named Sarah's emotional and social well-being.
And it provides a helpful starting point by outlining the physical effects of cystic fibrosis. The thick mucus build up the respiratory problems, the digestive issues, and the potential for stunted growth.
Right, so based on those physical challenges, what kind of emotional impact do you think Sarah might experience?
Well, I imagine it would be tough to cope with knowing you have a life-limiting condition.
Yeah.
And the constant medical interventions, the hospitalizations, the fear of your health declining at all seems incredibly emotionally draining.
It is, and don't forget the social impact. How might cystic fibrosis affect Sarah's relationships and interactions with others?
Well, the frequent hospitalizations and medical appointments could make it difficult to maintain friendships, participate in school activities, or hold down a job.
Right.
I imagine she might feel isolated or left out.
It's a valid concern, and there's also the potential for social stigma associated with having a chronic illness.
Oh,
People might not understand her condition, or they might be afraid to get too close.
that's so unfair. But I also imagine that going through something as challenging as cystic fibrosis could bring Sarah closer to her family and close friends.
Absolutely. Shared adversity can strengthen bonds, and there's also the potential for Sarah to connect with other people with cystic fibrosis through support groups or online communities.
All right, so it's not all negative. There are ways to find support and connection, even in the face of these challenges. Now, what about the past paper question from 2011 about cystic fibrosis?
That one asks you to analyze how this condition might negatively affect someone named Elena's level of education and employment prospects.
Okay, let's break that down first. Education. How might cystic fibrosis make it harder for Elena to succeed in school?
Well, frequent absences due to illness or hospitalizations can make it hard to keep up with coursework.
Yeah.
She might struggle to concentrate in class if she's feeling unwell, and fatigue can make it even harder to focus on schoolwork.
And she might have to miss important exams or assessments, which could affect her grades and future opportunities.
Exactly. And then there's the social aspect of school. Missing out on extracurricular activities and social events can make it harder to form friendships and feel like you belong.
It's all connected.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what about employment prospects? How might cystic fibrosis affect Elena's ability to get and keep a job?
Well, potential employers might be hesitant to hire someone with a chronic illness, fearing that they'll miss work frequently or be unable to perform certain tasks.
And even if Elena does get a job, she might have to take frequent time off for medical appointments or hospitalizations, which could affect her job security.
Right, and certain jobs might be off limits altogether if they require a lot of physical exertion or exposure to environmental triggers that could worsen her condition.
It seems like people with cystic fibrosis face a lot of hurdles when it comes to education and employment.
They do, but the good news is that there are organizations like the Cystic Fibrosis Trust, mentioned in your source material, that provide support and resources for people with cystic fibrosis and their families.
So they're not alone in this. There are people who understand what they're going through and can offer guidance and assistance.
Exactly. Okay, let's move on to Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Your source material has an activity that asks you to analyze how this condition might affect a young man named Jacob's physical, emotional, and social well-being.
Right. And it starts by laying out the physical impact. Jacob's leg muscles will weaken, making it difficult to walk, and eventually leading to wheelchair use. He might develop joint and spinal complications like scoliosis, which can cause pain and discomfort.
And as the muscles involved in breathing and heart function weaken, he'll face increasing respiratory and cardiac challenges. These are serious complications that can be life-limiting.
So how might Jacob feel about all of this?
Well, imagine being a young man and gradually losing the ability to do the things you love can lead to feelings of sadness, frustration, and even anger.
I can see that.
Jacob might mourn the loss of his independence and worry about his future.
And seeing his body change and weaken can impact his self-esteem and body image.
Absolutely. But remember, emotional well-being isn't just about the absence of negative feelings.
Okay.
It's also about finding ways to cope, build resilience, and maintain a sense of purpose and meaning in life.
Right. Jacob might find strength in his relationships with family and friends, or he might connect with others who are going through similar challenges. There's always hope.
Now, what about the social impact of Duchenne muscular dystrophy on Jacob's life? How might his relationships and social interactions be affected?
Well, as his mobility decreases, it might become harder to participate in activities with friends, go to school, or hold down a job. He might feel isolated or left out.
That's certainly a possibility, but it's important to remember that social well-being is about the quality of our relationships, not just the quantity.
Okay.
Jacob's family and friends might adapt their activities to include him, or they might visit him more often.
And he might find new friends through support groups or online community.
Exactly. It's all about finding those connections and sources of support. Now, there's also a past paper question about Duchenne muscular dystrophy that asks you to analyze how this condition might affect a young man named Tom's physical, emotional, and social well-being.
And this question highlights the same key points we've been discussing: the muscle weakening, the potential complications, the emotional toll, and the social challenges. It's all interconnected.
It is. And remember, Tom's story from the video we discussed earlier provides a really powerful illustration of how Duchenne muscular dystrophy can impact someone's life.
It's a lot to take in, but I think we've covered the main points pretty thoroughly.
We have, and hopefully, Ms. Hart's class, you're feeling a bit more confident in your understanding of these complex topics.
Yeah, it really is a lot to process, but I think going through those past paper questions and activities was super helpful.
I agree.
It's one thing to read about these conditions, but it's another thing entirely to really think about how they would affect someone's life on a day-to-day basis.
It is, and it's not just about memorizing facts for your exams.
Right.
It's about developing empathy and understanding for the challenges people face and recognizing the importance of support and inclusion.
Well said. Okay, Ms. Hart's class, we've covered a ton of ground today.
We have.
We've explored the impact of chronic illnesses,
Uh-huh.
dug deep into the world of genetically inherited conditions,
Right.
and even tackled some of those tricky past paper questions.
Yes, we did.
Hopefully you're feeling a bit more prepared for your tracking assessment next week and your Unit 1 exam this summer.
I hope so.
Absolutely. And remember, the key takeaway here is that physical health is intricately linked to emotional and social well-being.
It really is.
It's all part of the bigger picture.
Couldn't have said it better myself. As you continue your studies in health and social care, think about this.
Okay.
What can we do as individuals and as a society to better support those living with chronic illnesses and genetic conditions? How can we create a more inclusive and compassionate world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive regardless of their physical challenges?
That's something worth thinking about.
It is.
Good luck with your assessments, everyone. We're rooting for you.
Absolutely good luck.